To the curious, the seekers, and the experts, welcome. You're listening to Poli-Psych Podcast. Coronavirus has taken over most news cycles recently. We on the Poli-Psych team decided to take a look at various aspects of the impacts of the coronavirus. In this video, we are dealing primarily with the financial impacts of the coronavirus. As you will hear, we recorded the show on March 18th, which is now 2 days ago. In the meantime, the markets have seemed to stabilize somewhat. There is news of chloroquine, which has potential as a complete cure for virtually every case of coronavirus. And this morning, there is news coming out that a few key people in Congress, conveniently for them, sold shares of stocks prior to the market reaction to learning about coronavirus using insider information. It's regrettable that Don and Ken are not here to comment on that, but I'm scrolling through some tweets which will show the response of some on Twitter. Our discussion from March 18th begins with some comments from Ken.
It's March 18th, it's 2:17 p.m., and I'm seeing a spike in the VIX. It looks like it's right near the all-time high of 83.63. I don't know if that's completely, the VIX hasn't been measured the same way for as many years, but the S&P is at its all-time low in this event right now. Just highly unstable at this point. And reason I brought that up is that sometimes economic conditions determine what's happening in the stock market. But in this case, the stock market will determine what happens to economic conditions. I think we'll see that happen more and more. And it's kind of a frightening prospect, especially when we're caught off guard like we have been. There really was very little warning. We had some warning that this was coming, but it hit the market at a particularly vulnerable point of complacency, and I think the shock is still playing out in what we see in the volatility. So I think the new equilibrium is coming. Who knows what it looks like? I know there is talk of a reset, a financial reset. But the point I wanted to make with this was, if this was an act of terrorism or vandalism or whatever you want to call it, the target appears to have been the financial system, not mass casualties. I think the mass casualties are still a danger, but it's usually pretty easy to stop it, even though the measures may seem extreme. We are doing it right now, but you can see the effect it's having, the secondary effect it's having on the stock market, which actually then becomes the primary effect of destroying the economic conditions, at least temporarily. And I think we'll see that. We'll see see problems in the labor market next. We'll see potentially relatively high unemployment. Depends how we define employment. Now, one metaphor that I've been using with people in my life who panic about the stock market, and it's just an opinion, I'm not qualified to say this, but my own, just how I apply it to my own rationale, is I look at my stock holdings as you would look at a garden hose in the winter. The garden hose is still the same hose it was during the summer, but we're in the winter now, and that flow through is not there, but the structure of the economy has not really changed. If you step way back and look at what happened here, it's really there's a point source that caused this, and it was the virus. And hopefully we'll see a spring back if there is a successful vaccine. Let's just be as hopeful as possible and imagine that we wake up tomorrow and that they have effectively wiped out the risk of the virus, and that there are no side effects And I think that will happen. It's just a question of when it does happen. But the point is that the structure of the economy itself is still there. The garden hose is still there, but it's taught us a really big lesson. And I think there are a whole raft of things that will never be the same. I don't think we'll ever look at globalism the same way again. There will definitely be more attention paid to what would happen the next time a virus takes hold like this, I still think it's a weaponized virus. I definitely want to get some feedback on that, see what you think there, Don and Cindy. So it may actually leave us in a better place, but this is going to be difficult. It's going to be difficult. I'd say we could do a time projection. I think at least we're going to be looking at another month of this. It's almost like withstanding incoming shell fire or something like that. There's just really very little that people can do, but just sort of dig a little foxhole and hide for a while. It depends how long we can hold out, and I think we can hold out for quite a while. Humans can get used to almost anything. We're very adaptable. It's just we go through some drama in the beginning when we're rearranging the backdrop of what we consider normal, but we'll get through this. We're going to probably be hardened by the experience, and I think we'll be the wiser for it.
Yeah, Ken, I'm glad you went back to the market, because we really want to emphasize that the stocks in general are not the economy, but the president has been basically acting as if they are, and that's basically using the tactics that the controllers have used in the past, but he's using them to build his support, his brand, so to speak. And it's all driven by fear and greed. And what we've recognized that's going on here is fear, big time. And all of us that have somewhat of a stake in the markets don't want that fear to rule. We want that to peter out, to get over, so that we can move on to the next thing, and not hopefully irrational, exuberant greed, but some more stability that leads to positive growth. Now, in the process, in these market dips or recessions or whatever you want to call it, I actually don't think we're going to enter into a long period of recession. Now, some people might think that, and I think that the forces that have been in charge in the past probably do want that, but not for good reasons. But these are opportunities for us to learn, as we've been saying, what we've been doing wrong and where we hope to go in the future. And one of the underlying things about banking is that there has been a lot of deception in how banking has been run. And one particular aspect of that, which is always at the core or near the core of so-called conspiracy theories, is brilliantly outlined here in one of a very short Twitter thread by Joe M. at Storm is Upon Us. And in reply to Jordan Sather, he makes the following points. History of the parenthesis, them, and them is in 3 brackets, parentheses. Before Q, people tried to identify the New World Order banking criminals destroying the world. They didn't know it was a centuries-old cult who hijacked Judaism to blend in and claim anti-Semitism when criticized. All the bad guys seem to be Jews, in quotes. 2, these legacy truthers used them, in 3 brackets, to describe an enemy they identified as Jews, in quotes, wrongly associating the religion and ordinary Jews with what was really the globalist satanic cult who began a plan to destroy the world back in the 18th century. 3, so now our enemies in the hashtag fake news jump on this exact anti-Semitism function that this evil cult intended when they pretended to identify as Jews. They knew they could use persecution of Jews to insulate themselves. You were shamed for anti-Semitism precisely as designed. Point 4, and final point. Q showed us the real enemy and their history. Q showed us kill brackets, which I used to depict any evil associated with them in brackets. It upgrades, in parentheses, 3 parentheses, and signifies a more modern understanding of the enemy we face. they are truly Luciferians, and you are identifying as anti-Satan. Okay, so all this stuff about the banking system will, I believe, come out, especially as the Google censors are, as Google is decensored and people are allowed to do real searches and learn real things and learn real history. So I just thought Joe had a really concise explanation there that I wanted to get out there while we were talking about the economy.
Great points, Don. I read through the tweet. Joe M., I have been following him for a while as well. And I have a little different take on it. I am 1/4 Jewish, but the concept itself is, as a religion, is alien to me personally. I was raised as a Christian, and I don't identify as a Jew. So most of my ancestors came through Europe and were assimilated in what they call the Ashkenazi development. So I've never really been clear on what it is to be Jewish. I'm positively disposed as a Christian to the legacy of Judeo-Christian writings and certainly the philosophies, 10 Commandments, a bedrock of our lives as Christians. And yet, at the same time, I'm not sure if I can identify with the group, or even if it is a group you could identify. It's not a race, and sometimes people look at it as a race and abstract out the religion. So it's kind of a value judgment. Now, when I look at Joe M., I'm going to get a little bit theoretical on the Myers-Briggs and look at how the linguistic content stacks up for Joe M. Not a criticism, but he appears to be looking at what I would call the intuitive thinker as the enemy. And I've seen this happen before, where you could get, Bill Gates is an NT. It's the Myers-Briggs INTJ or ENTJ. The NT, that if George Soros ENTJ, Bill Gates, I think INTJ. So the NTs, what Joe M. may be actually addressing is the dominance that can be exerted by the conceptual thinker, the hard strategist, who almost has an intuitive sense of cooperating with another NT. NTs have this really weird mind field where they kind of know what's going to happen next when they're in a strategic situation. Don is an NT. I don't know if you've felt that, but I have seen people will sometimes regard that as especially feelers will look at that really negatively. And it is kind of a negative thing when you think about it. The thinking function is very cold, strategic, and in the extreme it just completely ignores the feeling vector. And it's an inhuman, you look at Darth Vader or somebody like that. I mean, that's kind of what you end up with when you get a human who's that imbalanced, where they're completely NT. They're not going to be even remotely sympathetic to the feelings of others. And this could be kind of what's going on, is that whether or not Judaism is a religion or a race, I don't know. But the bankers themselves, the string pullers, I think are just really tuned in NTs. And I think you've got Joe looking at this from the outside and maybe not fully comprehending that these are just psychological profiles of people that are string pullers, able to deal with numbers and abstract banking strategies and things of that nature. And yes, they do cooperate in a group. When you have a group of NTs, they know they can function in a really similar, even without having a specific plan. They just kind of know what's going to happen next and what the right move is, because in the world of logic, there's an immutable, unspoken calculation that takes place mathematics is very similar in that regard. It's the opposite with the feeler. It's based on a values situation. So I see some value judgments here in Joe's commentary. I think it's very useful. But when for instance, he says they are truly Luciferians, that's more of a value judgment. There's nothing logical about that statement. I guess you could if you had the right sense data and so on, but I just see it as an anti-collective. Call it whatever you want, but I think it's great that he made these observations, because there's definitely something going on under the surface, and it is a force that we need to reckon with, and probably, disengage it from ruining our collective culture.
Yeah, great points, Ken. And what I'm thinking is that the primary benefit and the main reason that I wanted to read the 4 tweets from Joe M. is that he's distinguishing something that I think is really important, and then that's that the Jewish people at large are not predatory bankers. And he does see the current central banking system that we are in right now as being predatory, and I do think he has good foundational logic for that, and even beyond that, I do think that there is logic that he hasn't presented here, that these central bankers are Luciferians. Now, again, he didn't present that there. He's not trying to prove it there, but I do think that information is going to be increasingly available, and as people see it, they're going to realize we don't want to be a planet where central bankers even is considered as a system would allow such people to have the control that they have had. And it has been very surreptitious, very behind the scenes, very disguised, although also very, very out in the open, so much so that the dollar bill and all of the American currency, paper currency, is filled with their symbolism. So it's almost undeniable if on the face of it we just learned to accept it. So I wanted to point that out. Yeah, just the main thing is that the Jews have been blamed, and that blame has been falsely placed on people who aren't really even Jews. And then there's the whole Khazarian thing, and we're not even going to get into there. But this thing has multiple layers, and I threw it out there because we are rethinking where we're going in terms of this, and we do need to learn real history. We do need to learn to look behind the curtain and see what's been really going on, and realize how sheltered we've been, and especially with the censorship changes, that we can actually get the true owners of the United States on Google right now. Well, I think this is just an amazing opportunity to take advantage of, and it almost makes you want to make that Google censorship change permanent, and I wonder if President Trump might find a way to do that.
The storm is definitely upon us, and it has all the feel of the last battle, and we'll watch the unfolding this spring. It may be a hot spring and summer.
Well, I just think it was a stroke of genius among many that President Trump is planning to send checks to Americans. And at the press conference today, which is March 18th as we speak, a lot of pressure was put on him by the press to define exactly what that would look like. What's the amount of the checks, and when will it happen? And they're talking about 2 weeks. And some of the amounts that have been thrown around are $750 per person, which would mean a family of 4 would get a little over $3,000. And that was the amount that was, they were throwing at the president. And he said it may be more than that, that most people want it to be very generous. And so the context for all that is, well, of course, it's very positive because it will help people who are staying at home because they can't go to work. And it will just, on many, many levels, it will help people, which is pretty obvious. But it also, to me, is almost kind of a karmic reversal of what was done in the banker bailout. In the banker bailout, a lot of money was, and I've heard different amounts, different figures. It was in the trillions, I think. That money was not given to the American people. That money was given to the banks. And I've not done the math myself, but I have heard that the amount of money that was given to the banks in the banker bailout would have been enough money to pay off every mortgage of every American. And that was, the way that was handled was disgraceful. 99% of Americans polled did not want the banks to be bailed out. And in fact, that was in 2008. That was one of the big turning points for me, that I realized the government really was not serving the American people. So if that money could have really been used to help the American people, we would have seen a different world back in 2008. And I believe that this time around, this crisis, the president is going to see that the right things are done and that the American people are served well. So I'm pretty enthusiastic about this check idea, and it won't be enough to by itself to save the economy. But the banker bailout did turn the ship in 2008. I'm not thrilled about how it happened and who was left holding, more finances. But what the president is planning to do will not only turn the ship, but I think will help accomplish some of the positive things that we've all been talking about.
I'd see they will commonly look at the outlay for the Iraq wars and some other things, the financial bailout, and then just divide that per capita taxpayer and just look at the transfer payment in the vast amount, especially with the I don't know, I think the price tag for the Middle Eastern conflicts, which might have been strategically there to safeguard the dollar. We'd have to study that as a separate topic. But so that's the concept, I guess, is just taking the transfer payment directly to the people this time. And we'll see how that affects the econometric, measurements of inflation and things of that nature. And as I tweeted Riley, this might be the first financial crisis where toilet paper becomes money and money becomes toilet paper.
Yeah.
We thank you for joining us for this consideration of the coronavirus. We hope that you have enjoyed this time. If you have, we ask that you would please click like, subscribe to us on YouTube, subscribe to us on BitChute, certainly follow us on Twitter, and if you have a moment, visit our website. Once again, thanks for joining us. Take care.